Welcome to Fundraising Leaders with Drew, where we embark on a journey to discover the heart and soul of nonprofit fundraising and decode the strategies that lead to fundraising success. My name is Drew Clancy, and I am grateful to be joined today by President Paul Maurer, who is a visionary. As the 8th president of Montreat College, Paul has led the college to clarify its identity as a Christ-centered institution. During his 10 years as president, the college has received nearly $100 million in private gifts, pledges, and grants, and more than $66 million has been pledged in the college's current capital campaign. Let's jump right in with President Paul Maurer. Welcome, President Maurer. Thanks so again for being with us today. Let's jump right in with the questions. As president, how do you see your role in involvement in Montreat's fundraising efforts and strategies? How do you collaborate on campus with your fundraising team, your alumni and development offices, various other offices on campus?
Yeah, thanks, Drew, for having me. It's a delight to be with you on this podcast and look forward to our conversation. I came to the presidency through the Chief Advancement Officer office. So I was in that role at a couple institutions, and I got into fundraising because I've always served in the nonprofit sector, and before I got into higher education, I was also serving in the nonprofit world. And I realized that fundraising was an important part of the economic model of the nonprofit world. And while I didn't start in fundraising and didn't really aspire to become a fundraiser and didn't really look forward to doing the fundraising, I realized a long, long time ago that if I was called into the nonprofit sector, which I believe that I was called into, that's a skill you ought to learn. And I learned as Chief Advancement Officer that the CEO really is the Chief Advancement Officer.
Sure.
And so I see my role as president as the Chief Advancement Officer over the Chief Advancement Officer. People want to talk to the CEO. They want to talk to the president. They want to talk to the person who casts the vision. And some donors, particularly major donors, really aren't going to really give the time of day to the Chief Advancement Officer in the same way they give to the CEO. So I embrace the role. I embrace it in part because it's true, and I realize that I'm the Chief Advancement Officer functionally, but also because I love people. I'm very relationship-oriented. I'm an extrovert. I love being with people. I love being externally facing. And so the combination works in my particular situation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What do you believe are the key elements of a successful fundraising strategy? And how do you approach developing and implementing effective strategies?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. And I may not be answering your question the way you want me to answer the question, but I don't start with strategy. Oh. I start with vision.
Love it.
And I think that the president or CEO of an organization has to be the chief visionary. And people give to vision and people give to people. And so my job in part is to, like when I came here to Montreat College 10 years ago, when I was a candidate, I asked the board, I said, what's the vision for the college? And one of the members of the search committee looked at me, also a trustee, and said, we think that's the president's job. So if you become president here, that's your job. And I was really pleased with that answer because I think he was correct. And I was hoping that that's the way he would answer. And everyone else on the search committee nodded in agreement. And so if an organization is going to have vision, it has to come from the CEO, in my opinion. It can't come from someone under the CEO, and it can't come from the board. It has to come from the person who's going to implement the vision through a strategic plan.
Sure.
So to me, good advancement, development, fundraising work starts with vision. Secondly, and then secondly, I don't think strategy is actually in the second position either. I think that relationship building is in the second position. So you start with vision, and then you go build
Yeah.
relationships. And like all of life, it took me a while to understand this, to realize this, and to be okay with it. But all of life is about relationships. It's relationships, relationships, relationships. In the same way that in real estate, it's about location, location, location. Like it's all about relationships. And if you have them, you can have a wonderful strategy and wonderful success fundraising, build an economic model. But if you don't have relationships, then you run the risk of it being transactional.
Right.
And I don't think that good fundraising and friend raising and development really can be transactional. I mean, you can do it that way, but
Sure.
I don't think you honor the donor at the deeper levels of philanthropy if you do it that way. And then I think strategy, you can implement and execute all kinds of strategy. But I think if you have vision and relationships as the top priorities, then I think you have the foundation by which you can execute strategy.
Well said. Well said. I'd be interested to know. So when you came aboard 10 years ago, um, talk to us a little bit about the vision, creating and then casting a vision. How do you see that? And how did you approach that then? And maybe is the vision, I'm sure, continues to evolve. Um, let us know a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, and not every CEO um, is a visionary. Like some 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 chief executives have vision and some don't, and some are somewhere in between. And so it's kind of a pretty wide spectrum. For me, I always believe I've long believed that what a vision is a hard, long, distant
Right.
horizon, something really big that you are going to have a really hard time getting
Sure.
to. And so I actually like to think in more generational terms. What what does something look like 20 years from now? What does something look like 30 years from now, 40 years from now, 50 years from now? A Jewish generation is 20 years, and so I'm using 20 years as a generational definition in this conversation. And so when I came to Montreat, I just started asking the question, how do we get to some level of greatness as an institution that we don't have today and that we probably have never had in our 100 years as an institution? And so I just worked with my faculty and my cabinet, my board, and I began to craft some language, and I began to test the language, and I wanted consensus and buy-in, because one person having a vision isn't enough. You've got to have a team that shares the vision. I can cast it, I can push it, I can inspire, but if you don't have buy-in, it doesn't really matter. And so the vision that we have for Montreat College is to be the premier Christ-centered college in the Southeast United States, the very, very best faith-based institution in the Southeast multiple state region. We want to be a leader at a regional, national, and international level in higher education. And we want to be the school of choice for thoughtful Christian believers in our region of the country. Like when they think about where to send their sons and daughters, people of faith, people in the church, people who care about a moral compass for their sons and daughters who believe in an eternal God, we want Montreat College to be the number one school they think of when they have junior high and high school students. So that's our
Yeah.
vision. It's a really big vision, and it is a generational vision, and it's really hard to measure. And then to me, a strategic plan is simply a 3 to 5 year snapshot of how you get closer to achieving the
Sure.
vision. And every strategic plan is just an incremental process of how you get closer to achieving that vision.
So good. So good. Let's turn. You said vision is primary. We start with that. Second is relationships. Let's obviously fundraising, relationships and fundraising are, you know, go together, synonymous. So how do you see cultivating relationships with major donors, or I guess let's start with major donors. What's worked for you at Montreat as you're building these relationships? If you'd like, you can share a couple of particular stories or not, really up to you. But let's go behind the scenes, or how do you think about this? How do you approach this?
Yeah, great questions. The way I think about it is in my first meeting or two or three with a prospective major donor, I want to find a match. The basic question I'm looking for is, are you interested? I don't assume that they're interested. They've got 1,000 options of where they can give their money philanthropically. Sure. They've got a million options of where they can give their money philanthropically. So where I start is casting vision. Here's who we are. Here's our identity. Here's where we want to go. Is this of interest to you? Is this something you would be excited about? Is this something you could get behind? Sometimes the answer is no, not really. I've got my things, but more often than not, there's some level of interest.
Sure.
And if philanthropy is going to be part of that relationship, I think they've got to get excited, be animated, be inspired, like really buy into the vision. People give to vision and people give to people. So they have to believe in the vision and they have to trust and believe in my leadership. Both of those are essential for them to give. And so those relationships, the relationship base at the beginning, I was with someone, what's today? Friday. I was with someone on Wednesday of this week who is relatively new into our world. And he lives in a cabin about an hour from our campus. And I was about to head out to Chattanooga on a road trip. And he's a little out of the way. And I said, why don't I just come see you before I head to Chattanooga? And he said, oh, no, that's really inefficient. It's out of the way. It's not a good use of your time. And you know what I said to him? Let me be the judge of what is a good use of my time. I want to come see you and just hang out and get better acquainted. Are you open to me coming? Like, if you don't want me to come because of you or you're busy,
sure,
that's fine. And I won't come. But don't make the decision for me as to what I think is a good use of my time. I think coming to see you is actually a very good use of my time. And he said, well, I know where you're coming. And I said, well, maybe you might actually know why I'm coming, but like, I believe in getting to know people, and you have begun to give to our institution. And I don't want you to feel like that's some sort of a transactional arrangement, that I actually care about you as a person. I got there. We had an hour and a half together, had a couple of cups of coffee and a muffin. And afterwards he said, I just really enjoy our conversation so much. I didn't go there to ask him for anything. I just wanted to be with him and build a relationship.
Love it. Love it. Great story. Great story. How do you see, again, the behind the scenes, coordination, collaboration with your alumni and development offices to make sure that your fundraising efforts, are in line with your strategic plan, in line with the greater vision? How do you all work together? What's that working relationship like? And how do you approach it?
Yeah. A couple of thoughts. One is that when we develop a strategic plan here, generally a 5-year strategic plan, we also built a capital campaign to complement it. A lot of strategic plans end up on a shelf. They get dusty. People get a little cynical over strategic plans, in part because things don't get done and progress isn't made and no one's accountable and they're not checking the they're not checking to see whether they're succeeding or
Right.
not, and they're not measurable objectives that are clear to know whether you're succeeding or not. So on the strategic plan front, we mapped out a 5-year strategic plan, and we had some really big goals in the plan, but we knew that we had to fund it, and we didn't have the money operationally to fund it. So a lot of colleges and K through 12s, this is how it
Right.
works: is you develop a strategic plan, you build a capital campaign to go along with it, and then you're seeking to fund areas of the strategic
Of course.
plan. We have a quarterly retreat as an executive team to review progress and obstacles with regard to the strategic plan. I meet weekly with my chief advancement officer. I have a separate meeting to work on with my chief advancement officer and my number one major gift officer. The three of us meet weekly also to talk about campaign and campaign prospects and strategy and moves management and all those things. But we are always at work working to fund elements of the strategic
Sure.
plan. Now, that said, we're in year 5 of a strategic plan, and the capital campaign has gone exceptionally well, way beyond any of our expectations, way, way beyond. But we've pivoted. Like, we started the campaign like 60 days before COVID.
Oh,
And so COVID hit, and we went, we need to pivot some things in the objectives of the capital campaign. That'll adjust some things in the strategic plan. Went back to the board, and we made those adjustments. And just last week, something came into our world that is probably going to alter the campaign yet again. We'll probably add a new major objective, and we will probably take out an equal dollar amount of objectives in the current capital campaign, and we're going to swap things out because we think it's probably smart
right.
to do. Now, I'll go through the process with our board to do that. I do have the advantage of having been a chief advancement officer, so I take a lot of the leadership in these meetings, and I've got a young chief advancement officer currently with me, so he's kind of learning the ropes. But it's a very collaborative. I realize that I probably am the person to make most of the big asks. I'm happy to do that. I've done it for a long time. And the advancement office sets up the meetings. They do the follow up. But the really major asks, I make most of those.
Sure. Let's talk about the different elements at play. So obviously there's the major gift effort. You have your mid-level or leadership annual fund, and you've got your annual fund. You've also got planned giving. Or any thoughts on anything specific there? Maybe some novel or interesting perspectives or strategies on any of those, or maybe a different way of seeing things, or just something that's been very successful perhaps with one of those?
Well, I've heard forever that, right, you gotta get away from being major donor dependent, and you've got to really build out the mass giving. The reality is, in 35 years of doing this, that most of the organizations I've been with don't really succeed at that. They don't. It's really hard to build a broad base in the college world of alumni percentages. It's a bit of a game. You really staff up in a big way. You can get 30-40% annual alumni giving on an annual basis, but it is a massively labor-intensive work to get those levels of percentage. And then what do you get from that? Well, sometimes you get major donors that come out of that, and some schools do it for U.S. News and World
Sure.
Report. And we do not chase U.S. News. I think U.S. News is a terrible way to think about the quality of a higher educational institution. I think it's just, and there was a really good article a couple of years ago in the Chronicle of Higher Ed about what a sham U.S. News is. And so, but people drink that Kool-Aid and they follow it, and schools follow it. And I've worked in an institution that chased it. We don't chase that at all. As much as I'd love to have a really broad, deep base of alumni support, we don't. I wish we did. And so the reality is that in terms of the success of a capital campaign, a strategic plan, it's so much about major donors. And if you build a really good major donor base, you can do a lot of things as an organization.
Sure. Yeah, it's the old 80-20 rule is sometimes it feels like more 90-10 or 95-5 or
Totally.
What about the role of data and analytics in informing and optimizing your strategies? Understand you're a smaller college, so perhaps you've got relationships, and so maybe that isn't a big strategy. Maybe it is. But how do you see data and analytics today, specifically around fundraising?
Yeah, I think it's really important, and you need good data. You've got to have it. It is an endless fight to have good data. People move, they change their email addresses, they don't come and tell you. So there's always kind of a lag on that, and a lot of small schools, and we're included. We have a very modestly sized staff in our advancement office. If you're modestly staffed, keeping up with data and becoming data sophisticated is not likely. I would not say that we are data sophisticated. We have good, solid data. We run reports. I would love to be more data savvy and more data driven. The reality is that it is more relationship driven.
Sure.
Than it is data driven. I think that's the way it should be in the macro picture anyway. But I would say I would not consider that a strength of most of the institutions I've worked for over the years.
Taking a step back and maybe thinking a little bit about, or I'm interested in your perspective on the qualities, characteristics, traits of a successful fundraiser, someone who's successful. You've outlined obviously relationship building and perhaps casting a vision. Are there other things that you think make someone effective in this critical area?
I do. And again, I came through major gifts. I didn't really come through the annual fund shop. I came through capital campaigns and major gifts, and I did foundation work for a while. And, when I'm looking for a chief advancement officer or particularly a major gift officer, my standard is my starting standard is this. Would I like to go have beer with him on a Friday night? Would I enjoy being with him or her? Are they good conversationalists? Are they enjoyable? Are they enjoyable to be with? Are they fun? Are they interesting? Are they thoughtful? If they don't have those qualities, it's really hard to be a major gift officer because you got to go hang out with people. You got to ask good questions. You got to be curious. You got to actually be interested in walking the factory floor with the business owner and saying, "This is fabulous. Teach me about your business. This is wonderful." Like someone who likes to learn, someone who's curious, someone who's other-centered. So all of those things are, I think, at the heart of building good relationships in a major gift program. But then you have to be able to ask for the order. So there is a quality of fearlessness that I think is essential. Okay, I'm going to lean into this. When I was a young gift officer and young chief advancement officer, asking people for big amounts of money was hard to do. Now, it's not hard anymore, but it took a lot of practice, a lot of repetition, a lot of habituation, and a shaping of my perspective that I really am asking them to join a partnership. I really am helping them become a better version of themselves. I really believe that. because I think we are designed by God to give ourselves away. And part of that is to give away the thing that we clutch most tightly to, and that is money. It's the last, someone said a long time ago, the wallet's the last thing to be converted.
I love that.
And I think that's right. People seek money, they grasp money, they hold it tightly. And if they can joyfully give it away, so that element, be with people, be interesting. Like, I want to have dinner with you, and then be willing to ask for the order and have that level of fearlessness. And then you got to be able to follow up, because closing is a different exercise than asking. Right. We all know that. And so that's kind of what I look for when I look for advancement staff.
Oh, that's great. What a powerful framework, Paul. Thank you. Let's think a little bit about trends, or you mentioned you've been in your current role for 10 years and maybe 20 years before that, and obviously looking into the future. How do you think the fundraising landscape has evolved over the years, and what trends, challenges do you foresee that fundraisers should be thinking about, be prepared for?
Yeah, I mean, the amount of wealth in this country is just stunning. The endless supply of cash and greatest creation of wealth in human history has happened in this country, in this republic, and in this century. Or in the last century. Sure. And so the transfer of wealth that's happening is unprecedented. The amount of wealth that is in our country is unprecedented. There's enough for everybody. There's plenty. If you have a worthwhile organization, a clear vision, a clear mission, a good leader, the willingness to build relationships, you can raise money, and you can raise a lot of money. And you can raise a lot of money from a lot of different sources. And some are harder than others, and the ROI is different, and all those metrics exist, and blah, blah, blah. But in the macro picture, unless we go back through, and the economy always has cycles. So the dot-com bubble burst in 2000, the Great Recession in 2008, we're going to have another one. It'll happen, and then we'll probably recover, because that's the nearly 100-year history of our economy and stock market. Sure. The wealth created by the stock market is unbelievable and unprecedented in world history. And so I have no reason to think that in my lifetime or a young leader's lifetime that's going to change substantially. There will always be needs. There's great wealth. If you do your work right and build your relationships right and have a compelling vision, you can raise money.
You're here. Just a couple more questions, and I'll let you go. Montreat is a Christian college, faith-based college, and I'm interested in yourself, Paul, as a Christian leader. What principles or biblical teachings guide your leadership philosophy and decision-making?
Yeah, great question, Drew. Thank you for that. It's my second presidency, and I learned a lot of really hard and necessary lessons between my first and second presidency. And when I got into my first college presidency, and I'd been a Christ follower for a long time before that, but I realized afterwards I didn't really connect the dots the way I needed to, meaning I'm a type A, I'm driven, I like to check the box, I'm achievement oriented. And I was leading from my default position of excellence and effectiveness and getting the job done. And as a Christian, that's the wrong default mode. That's the wrong mode from which to lead, is to just allow be your default mode. And so what is the New Testament teaching? What is Jesus teaching about leadership? Where does it start? It starts with humility. And then, and that's the personal quality that a Christian leader should cultivate more than any, in my opinion, is personal humility, understanding who we are in relationship to God, that it's a level playing field with all human beings. Like, my version of understanding diversity does not come from DEI or any cultural definition. It comes from the biblical definition that we're all created in the image of God, and that we all have inherent value and dignity because God says so. And that heaven is going to be a great collection of every tribe and tongue. Every knee will bow, and my job is to build relationships with all people. And so my campus, I want to look like a slice of heaven. And thankfully, we have tremendous diversity here. So I start with humility, and then after humility is trust, building trust with your team, building trust with your faculty. Like in higher education, the faculty administration are supposed to be at loggerheads. I say baloney. Let's build trust. Let's trust each other. Let's work together. We have a common vision. We have a common mission. And I have really great relationships with my faculty. It's really easy and fun. And I go road biking with members of my faculty, and like I hang out with them. And it's actually very, very pleasant to work with my faculty on campus. After trust, my third core value is relationships. It took me a while to believe that relationships were more important than getting the job done because I'm a type A, but I finally came around to it. And so effectiveness is number 4 on my sequential list of core values. So it starts with humility, and then trust, the relationship part, putting relationships ahead of effectiveness, and then getting the task done. Now, the space between number 1 and number 4 is thin. You have to be effective. You have to get the job done. You have to execute with excellence. You have to do all those things, but hopefully the way you execute excellence and effectiveness is impacted if you have humility, trust, and relationships ahead of it. So it's not that you aren't effective, it's how you do effectiveness or how you approach your very large vision. So you treat people well, and you take inventory on a daily basis about who you are under the Lord and with and as a co-equal with others that He's called alongside you.
So powerful. Thank you, President Maurer. This was a powerful conversation. Lots of great ideas. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for all your wisdom, and look forward to connecting with you in the future.
Thanks so much, Drew. Great to be with you today.